Yes, good morning. This is May the 4th, and for my Star Wars friends, May the 4th be with you, of which I am one. Um, we are rapidly approaching the end of our year, and as I promised, we are going to take one more unit. And as of right now, the test on this unit is scheduled for Friday, May the 8th, although that could change. We might bump it back to the following Monday or Tuesday or even Wednesday. But yes, our year is coming to a quick close. Welcome this morning. I will be, I've already posted, well, I haven't posted on Canvas, but I will add this video onto Canvas and talk about the new subject matter, which is industrialism, the industrial age, in its relation to art. Industrialism and its relation to art. Realism, which is a part of that same idea. And then a new art wave, Impressionism. Let me, and by the way, I graded your tests are graded and your grades are on Infinite Campus. Let me, yeah, there it is. Let me, come on, you, there it goes. Let me give you a second to page up your industrialism. Perhaps I did or did not put that on your canvas. Let me make sure that you do have the industrial age, the spirit of materialism on canvas. Yes, that would be a major league downer if that wasn't there. Get rid of that. Forgive me. I just want to make sure. There it is. Yes. Yes, I put it on Canvas, and now I'm going to publish Canvas for you so that you'll have it at your fingertips. Yes, it is now published. So if you look on Canvas, you will see the unit on Arts and Humanities, Unit 11, the Industrial Age, the Spirit of Materialism. And so, yes, that will be there. Oh, there we are. Now, oh boy, I'm just a little confused this morning. And there it is, and there that is. I'm sorry, getting organized. Yes. So a few words about this new art form. Good morning, Mr. Halleck. Good morning, Mr. Pugh. Good to see you. To be honest, I am. I don't like this art. You know, I'm not a big fan of realism. And I'm sure not a big fan of Impressionism. I mean, and nor the post-Impressionist movement. Realism is just too gritty for me. You know, if I wanted to look at gritty realism, I would take a tour of, the more unfortunate of this world. That'd be realism. I don't like to recreate myself in that manner. And Impressionism, I don't know. I just like my pictures real. even though Romanticism is not really real. I mean, Romanticism is an idealized picture of something. However, let's start with this idea that is in your first paragraph. I hope you've pulled it up by now, the unit on the industrial age. Arts and Humanities, Unit 11, the industrial age, the spirit of materialism. So, with the coming of the industrial age, the world began to change at a mathematically quickening rate. You say, what does that mean? There's a question about this on your test. And beginning with the industrial age, the world does begin to change, and also the population of the world also begins to increase at and here is the key word, an exponential rate. Population of the world begins to increase at an exponential rate. Getting texts from text from the other teachers in the department asking about something that's not related to this. Yes, the population of the world begins to increase at an exponential rate. In other words, one generation represent one generation as 2, the next generation as 4, the next generation as 16. You get the idea. An exponential rate, meaning that the period of time in which it takes the population of the world to double is decreasing. That is not sustainable, but yeah. But and a lot of that's part of the industrial age. And the industrial age really is probably the most important revolution in the history of mankind. Why? Well, it's quite simple. Think of where you are right now and everything that you are physically coming in contact with. Everything that you are physically coming in contact with. Paper towel was mass produced in an efficient manner as a result of the industrial age. So anyway, getting back to the matter at hand. More industry meant more prosperity for more people. More people with disposable income meant that arts could be consumed and enjoyed for a widening audience. You know, and I've told you this before, we all do the arts. We all appreciate art. And the more money disposable income we have, the more art we do, the more we appreciate. Meaning the arts could be consumed and enjoyed for a widening audience. Paintings and sculptures of gods and heroes, the nobility in this new industrial age just would not do anymore. You know, the high-minded art of the Renaissance would not do anymore. Art that could only be purchased by the elites would not do. And so you began to see a widening of the field of art and also a mass production of the art field. Okay. With the advent of the daguerreotype, a word that is on your test, the daguerreotype. In America, it was called the tintype. It was an invention of a French chemist by the name of Louis Daguerre in 1839. And what Daguerre discovered was that if you take the right assortment of chemicals, put the chemicals in a pan, In that pan, put a certain kind of white paper, and then encase it all in a black box. And the front of the box has a lens, and at the back of the box, there's a reflective mirror that points the light down into the chemical solution. That if you point the box in a certain direction at a certain object for a prolonged period of time, 20, 30 minutes, that an image of what the daguerreotype device was looking at through the lens would be projected onto the paper. And that took the art world by the hair and the roots, because, you know, what it meant was that, you know, prior to this, if you wanted a picture of yourself or your family or something important, you would have to go out and find some guy who was skilled at being able to produce something like that. And then you'd have to pay him lots of money. And then you would have to take a lot of time to wait for your work of art. Well, Louis Daguerre took care of all that. Oh yeah, you still had to pay the guy. And to be honest, the early black and white illustrations were, you know, they faded. Andrew Jackson, by the way, was the first United States president to be Andrew Jackson was the first United States president, by the way, to be photographed. But anyway, getting back to the matter at hand, suddenly having to pay some guy lots of money and taking lots of time just to produce a illustration of what something exactly looked like, you know, didn't need it anymore. Didn't need the artist anymore. Didn't need to pay the guy anymore. And so, and it's not a coincidence that what you see after the invention of the daguerreotype, after the invention of photographic, what is called academic art, where the picture looks exactly like what the painting is supposed to represent, there's no need for it anymore. Oh yeah, sure, people still had their portraits painted, but it became an extravagance. And more people, instead of getting their portraits painted, they had their tintype, which was the common name for photograph. Then a photograph made. Cheaper, quicker, more people could have them. And the point of all this is that in the art world, art had to go in another direction. Once again, no longer could just painting a scene to look like the scene do. You had to go in a different direction. And that's why we see the shift from realism art, which is the first art we're going to talk about, realistic art, to Impressionism and then post-Impressionism. And like I said, once we get into realism, Impressionism, post, you know, I'm kind of. However, in the same breath, you must admit that Impressionism is the most duplicated and purchased type of art there is since people began buying art. Yes, it is. Part of that reason was because many of the works of art, many of the works of Impressionist art, like Monet's Lilies, were made as lithographs, were made to be reproduced. Largely because a lot of the Impressionist artists, who, by the way, most of them all knew each other. We're talking about Renoir, Degas, Monet, and Manet. Most of them, not only did they know each other, they all pretty much hung out in the same neighborhood in Paris. And these guys were the original what are called starving artists. In other words, they eked by on what they could make, but they, their lives were dedicated to their art, and their paintings didn't go for much at first, not at all. And then you get into the post-impressionist period. Gauguin, of course, Vincent van Gogh, and it's Van Gogh, by the way, not Van Gogh. But yeah, gee, I wish they'd leave me alone. So, getting back to the matter at hand. So, invention of the daguerreotype, the invention of the camera, which is what it is. The invention of the camera changes the art world forever. It does. So, as it says there, with the advent of the daguerreotype, meant that an artist who could just paint a picture that looked like the object he was painting was not nearly as valuable as it once had been. So what successful artists began to do was to see through the image and to more and more to give his impression of what he's portraying. Thomas Edison, during this same era, yes, Thomas Edison, lit up the night. And by the way, Thomas Edison is on your test. Please tell me you know he invented the light bulb. But more than inventing the light bulb, Thomas Edison created the world of night. I mean, think about it. Prior to Thomas Edison's practical light bulb, this planet shut down after sundown. Pretty much shut down after sundown. There's actually a book written that Mr. Halleck is familiar with called A World Lit Only by Fire, which talks about what the world was like prior to electrical illumination. And it really was. It really did. You didn't go anywhere after dark. I mean, yeah, sure, people did, but it was, dangerous. Not just that you might get mugged, but you could get lost. You couldn't see very well. You'd walk down streets, and the light of the street would only be the lights coming through people's windows onto the street. There weren't any street lights per se. Nighttime activities, forget about it. Until Thomas Edison, obviously. So yes, Thomas Edison lit up the night, and now the day extended well past sundown. The world at this time was being dominated in every facet of endeavor by the European continent. Europe had the highest standard of living in the world, had the best universities, and Europe actually had the most liberal democracies, along with a revival of indoor plumbing. And I know you guys think I'm a freak, but you cannot overemphasize the role that plumbing plays in modern society. In fact, I just had a plumber here Friday replace a garbage disposal, but he was here. And so had the higher standard of living world, the revival of indoor plumbing, meaning that many of the diseases of the early industrial revolution that were caused by the fact that people couldn't get rid of their own waste, get them away from them, were now being washed out in the sewers. If we were back in class, we would watch and script a film called The History of Plumbing. Yeah. Because and we'd watch it right now because that film is all about how things changed during the industrial age, not only with the advent of installing modern sewer systems, but also with the manufacture of plumbing, fittings, devices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, one of the things we would discover in studying that is that I cannot, these people. One of the things that we can discover in that is that I know I should turn it down, shouldn't I? Yes, Mr. Horton, turn this down. Where is that? And there it goes. Now they won't bing. But anyway. Not only that, but also the idea of taking a bath a day as being healthy. Anyway, but during this period of time we're talking about right here, city of Chicago, and Mr. Halleck has heard of this before, but the city of Chicago, Mr. Pugh, the city of Chicago had a plumbing system that dumped its waste out into Lake Michigan. If you've ever been to Chicago, in fact, the city of Chicago, what they would do, they had sewers of a sort, and the sewers emptied waste into the Chicago River. And the Chicago River would simply flush the waste out into Lake Michigan. Of course, Lake Michigan, if you've ever been there, Lake Michigan's an ocean. And so it looks like, it's gone. Problem was this, that the city of Chicago also got its drinking water from Lake Michigan. And when the sewage waste began to foul the drinking water, the city of Chicago's simple answer was simply to take the intake box, the water intake box that brought water into the city of Chicago, and just move it further out, deeper into Lake Michigan. Well, that was great until 1874, when there came a rainstorm in Chicago that lasted 4 days. And that rainstorm flushed all those sewers out in the Chicago River and out far into Lake Michigan. Basically so that the city of Chicago was drinking their own sewage. As a result of that, the city of Chicago lost 25% of its population were killed with typhus, diphtheria, and other waterborne illnesses from drinking their own sewage. And, what's even more fascinating to me, it's more fascinating to me than that is this. So what the city of Chicago did, they came up with a really novel solution. Now, if you've ever been to Chicago, the Chicago River flows through Chicago into Lake Michigan. So what the city of Chicago did was this. They actually dug out the Chicago River. They dug it so where that the water flow, instead of from going out to Lake Michigan, went from Lake Michigan. They deepened the channel. They reversed the flow of the river. So instead of it went from Lake Michigan, and they dug this channel, and the channel emptied into the Mississippi River. Of course, so what happened to the sewage then? The idea was that the sewage would be the sewage would simply flow out to the Mississippi River. What happened to it then? City of Chicago didn't care, because in 1875, the upper reaches of the Mississippi River, we were talking about close to the source, and was a big wilderness, and so they didn't care. I mean, that was an interesting solution that they came up with. It didn't last long, because you still have basically open sewage going into the Chicago River. And the bigger the city got, the more that was an untenable solution. So, but anyway, plumbing. The revival of indoor plumbing. That's interesting. I just think that's fascinating, especially when I go to Chicago. I love Chicago. And cutting the city of Chicago half, Chicago River, which every St. Patrick's Day, they dye the river green. Modern water and wastewater systems, these cities with police forces, not to mention the fact that the rest of the world was ruled politically by European colonial powers. I mean, Europe was ruling the world, who enjoyed this thing called the white man's burden, which we will talk about later on. And you know what? We're going to end there today. 25-minute class. There's a video I want you to look on realism. I did great. Your tests are graded and up. And I'm going to call it a day today. And I will get back to you tomorrow. Once again, our test looks like it will be Friday. And so, yeah, I've had it. I hope you all have a great Monday. It's a beautiful day to get outside. And I will see you. Bye now.